Do you think do you have a belief, or do you just try to interpret the text and try to see what is the message?
Scientists have just found something unbelievable, which is a 2,000-year-old letter that they say was written by Jesus. It was found hidden in a clay jar, and the message inside has shocked everyone who has read it. Some say it confirms everything they've believed, while others think it changes everything. But what exactly does the letter say? Another pressing question is, how real is this letter? Join us as we dive into this surprising discovery, break down what the letter reveals, and explore why it's causing such a stir worldwide. The discovery that shook the world. The moment the ancient jar was unearthed beneath layers of rubble near modern-day Sanliopa, Turkey, something extraordinary happened. Inside lay a carefully sealed clay vessel, remarkably intact after nearly 2 millennia. When conservators cracked it open, they discovered a rolled Aramaic scroll, potentially penned by Jesus himself, shaking the foundations of biblical archaeology and capturing the world's imagination overnight. Think of finding a handwritten note from Albert Einstein, except this one could predate the most famous gospel manuscripts. How often do such time capsules appear, untouched for centuries? This discovery is the archaeological equivalent of stumbling onto Beethoven's own autograph or a Beatles demo tape, authentic, singular, and charged with significance. But here's what's quite interesting. This discovery brings to mind the buzz that erupted in March 2021, when Israeli archaeologists rappelled into the depths of the so-called Cave of Horror and uncovered around 80 fresh fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was thrilling for a couple of reasons. These were the first new biblical manuscripts found in a professional excavation in some 60 years, and they'd been untouched since the Bar Kokhba revolt nearly 1900 years ago. Written in Greek and featuring portions of Zechariah and Nahum from the Book of the 12 Minor Prophets, these fragile pieces offered a window straight into the religious texts treasured by Jewish rebels centuries ago. The excitement that followed was intense, not only among biblical scholars, but around the globe. These ancient parchments, preserved by the Judean desert's harsh environment, emerged practically overnight to rewrite parts of the textual history of the Hebrew Bible. Beyond the fragments themselves, the expedition also unearthed a 6,000-year-old child skeleton and a woven basket dating back more than 10,000 years, giving us a rare, multi-millennia snapshot of human life in those caves. It was a vivid reminder that these time capsules, sometimes sealed by centuries of dust and silence, have the power to reshape our understanding of history overnight, and nothing captures the public's imagination quite like that. The use of first-century Aramaic and carbon dating results, placing the scroll firmly in Jesus' era, lends credibility to the find. But carbon dating can sound abstract, so imagine it as a kind of clock inside every piece of parchment, letting scientists tell time by measuring how its atoms decay. This gives us confidence that the scroll did indeed originate roughly 2,000 years ago, making it a genuine relic from antiquity. And the handwriting? Experts say it resembles early Jewish scribal styles, suggesting it wasn't mass-produced or forged centuries later. Instead, it likely emerged amidst the turmoil of Roman-occupied Judea, written when oral teaching still dominated Jesus' immediate circle. That makes it more than a relic. It's a sensory bridge to an ancient world. What would it mean if these words were actually Jesus' own? Would faith be shaken or strengthened? Writing wasn't his usual form of communication, so why put pen to paper now? Perhaps the message was intended for someone he trusted, a personal note to be read in confidence rather than preached publicly. The legend of King Abgar V of Edessa, who corresponded with Jesus according to Eusebius in the 4th century, provides historical precedent. If this scroll aligns with that tradition, it offers rare synchronicity between archaeological evidence and early Christian narratives, something scholars scarcely dared dream about. But suspicions abound. Could this be a forgery, a clever modern construct? Doubters point to style inconsistencies or echoes of New Testament themes. These debates are like exploring multiple potential routes to the same peak, some steep and risky, others trodden and familiar. Each theory must be tested, not just accepted. To rule out deceivers, scientists applied multispectral imaging to read hidden ink layers, along with textual comparisons to other first-century documents. It's akin to peeling back the layers of an onion to see whether what's underneath holds up to scrutiny. The public reaction has been a tidal wave. Believers see hope and confirmation. Skeptics demand rigorous proof. But regardless of where you stand, the discovery, sealed in a jar for 2 millennia, is undeniably compelling. After all, how often do we encounter physical evidence that could reshape our understanding of the foundations of Christianity? At a deeper level, the real discovery might not just be the scroll itself, but the questions it inspires about authenticity, tradition, faith, and the fragility of history. This single moment, opening a jar, unrolling parchment, could rewrite textbooks and reawaken ancient debates. And that is precisely why the world paused to listen. But what are experts saying? Keep watching to find out. Experts' opinion on whether it's really from Jesus. To confirm the originality of this letter, many experts have used different methods. First, the smoke test of carbon dating. Scientists use carbon-14 analysis to estimate age, which is like checking the birth certificate of the parchment. In this case, tests indicate the scroll comes from the 1st century, aligning with Jesus' lifetime. Handwriting analysis adds a human touch. Experts compare scribal styles, analogous to recognizing a signature or unique signature style today. Early Jewish scribal conventions seem present, suggesting the scroll could be genuine. But not everyone's convinced. Some scholars spot echoes of later Christian texts, raising the possibility of copying or fabrication. Imagine finding a diary that quotes Shakespeare. It could be authentic, or just a clever imitation. Building on these initial investigations, material science enters the scene to dig deeper. Tests like ink composition, multispectral imaging, and even pollen analysis, yes, pollen, help confirm provenance, a bit like forensic evidence in a detective story. If Jesus didn't typically write, why now? The rarity could indicate importance. Perhaps he penned this to someone very close, making the moment rare and profound. Historical parallels add weight. The early Christian Gospel of Jesus' wife and texts like the Sunday letter show precedent for personal letters attributed to Jesus, though their authenticity remains debated. This is why cross-disciplinary scrutiny is crucial. A mix of theology, archaeology, chemistry, and linguistics ensures no single field dominates, reminding us that truth often lies at the intersection of perspectives. Some experts say carbon dating isn't enough. They want to see if the writing style, beliefs, and message truly match the time of Jesus. Could someone copy Jesus' way of speaking but still get it wrong? Scholars are still debating. For example, when Harvard looked into the Jesus' wife fragment, it didn't end the argument. And this new scroll is no different. More tests and open discussions are needed. In the end, we all have a decision to make. Should we see it as a possible hidden gem, or stay doubtful until we have rock-solid proof? And if we do believe it, how might that change the way we see faith, history, or the world? Let's look at what the letter says, and that might perhaps help us answer some of these questions. The message inside the letter. King Abgar, the fifth of Edessa, was a real historical figure who ruled the ancient city of Edessa in modern-day Turkey during the early 1st century. He is most famously associated with a centuries-old Christian tradition known as the Legend of Abgar. According to this account, Abgar, stricken with a debilitating illness, often described as leprosy or a similar affliction, had heard of Jesus' miraculous healing powers. Though physically distant, Abgar wrote to Jesus, expressing both his admiration and his desperation, asking him to come and heal him. In some versions of the legend, Abgar also offers Jesus safe refuge from the mounting threats against him in Judea, a touching gesture that highlights both his faith and political power. What's striking about Jesus' reported reply is how it diverges from the doctrinal tone of gospel sermons. Here's what this means. Rather than addressing a crowd or making sweeping theological claims, Jesus responds to Abgar with warmth and personal concern. He gently declines the king's invitation to come in person, foreshadowing his impending death, but promises to send a trusted disciple in his place, often believed to be Thaddeus, also known as Adai, who would later heal Abgar and spread Christianity in Edessa. This exchange, whether entirely historical or partially legendary, paints a vivid picture of early Christian expansion, not as a top-down doctrine, but as relational outreach, one heart reaching out to another. The letter thus offers not just a glimpse into ancient belief, but into how Jesus was personally understood, even beyond Judea's borders. The letter also talks about identity. Jesus signs off as Christ Jesus, Son of Man, a deep and meaningful title with roots in the Bible. It's not something he often used, which makes it feel more real. After all, why would a faker pick such a rare phrase? Here's something to think about. If just a few words in the letter show both friendship and a deep sense of purpose, could that change how we see Jesus' understanding of who he was? The way the letter mixes kindness with quiet authority feels like someone who truly knew he had both a human and divine role. Some scholars say the letter feels very personal and real. It encourages healing, but also reminds the reader to trust God's timing. There's no heavy preaching or big religious arguments, which might actually make it more believable. A fake writer might try to sound impressive, not humble. Still, critics aren't convinced. They say some lines sound like they were pulled from later Christian writings or copied from the Gospels and other old texts. That makes them wonder if it was written after Jesus' time. But others argue that it's natural for a personal letter to sound similar to stories people were already telling. Are we so focused on finding deep teachings that we miss the simple beauty of caring words? This letter reminds us that helping one person can matter just as much as preaching to a crowd. On top of that, science backs it up so far. Tests using special imaging show no signs of fake layers or edits. The ink, handwriting, and old parchment all point to it being genuinely ancient. Still, experts haven't all agreed yet, and you might just be wondering why this even matters today. You'll soon see why. Why this message matters today. This ancient letter isn't just a historical artifact. It acts like a time-traveling postcard, connecting modern readers directly with a voice from the distant past. Just as we treasure personal letters from iconic figures, this discovery could generate emotional resonance in believers and researchers alike. Its significance ripples into interfaith dialogues. Jewish scholars scrutinize Jesus' relationship with Torah, while Christian theologians explore how such a letter might reshape perceptions of his identity. Could this relic foster richer conversations between religious traditions? Beyond theology, it raises questions in historical methodology. If authenticated, the letter would join a rare list of texts directly linked to Jesus, offering fresh data for textual critics analyzing oral tradition versus written word. This matters because nearly all our earliest sources were oral before being committed to ink. Even skeptics benefit, because when unexpected findings disrupt our certainties, like dating authenticity or scribal contexts, it compels us to reevaluate assumptions. Think of it as scientific humility in action. Just when we think we know the story, a new twist forces us to rethink. And what about everyday life? A message grounded in compassion and personal healing, if genuine, cuts across centuries. In a culture saturated with sound bites, this letter's intimacy invites listeners to pause and reflect, mirroring how a handwritten note from a mentor can inspire hope amid turmoil today. How could a short, heartfelt note from Jesus have more real-world impact than centuries of doctrinal text. That tension, Scripture's weight versus personal words, reminds us how context shapes meaning. When this new letter emerged, people online immediately compared it to past sensational finds, like claims that Jesus was married or hidden gospels lost to history. Back in 2012, Harvard's Karen King introduced the so-called Gospel of Jesus' Wife papyrus, which included the line, "Jesus said to them, 'My wife.'"
Probably in the second half of the 2nd century. That's between about 150 and 200 AD. Thought that Jesus had a wife.
Social media lit up, blogs buzzed with excitement and plenty of what-if questions. But soon, experts raised serious doubts about its grammar, wording, and odd handwriting, calling it a clumsy forgery. Although some very precise tests, such as carbon dating and ink analysis, suggested the fragment might be old, later investigations, including a deep Atlantic expose, revealed questionable provenance and copied phrases, leading King herself to say it leans toward modern forgery. A separate but equally intriguing story involves the so-called Secret Gospel of Mark. In the late 1950s, scholar Morton Smith claimed to have discovered a hidden letter quoting a version of Mark that included nighttime teachings by Jesus, some even hinting at mystical or intimate moments. The finding sparked heated debate. Some scholars believed it could open a window on forgotten early traditions, while others raised suspicion. Critics pointed out missing manuscripts, lack of ink or parchment testing, and odd overlaps with 20th century fiction, leading many to declare it a forgery. Still, a small group maintains it might be genuine. Many more say that most New Testament scholars assume it's a fake, but no one has been able to prove it. It would have taken an extraordinary level of knowledge to avoid detection. But it doesn't end here. These controversies show the tug-of-war between sensational rumors and scientific caution. In both cases, defenders argue the texts could reflect real early beliefs about Jesus having a wife or sharing secret teachings, while critics point to patchwork copying, missing history, or shady provenance. Science has stepped in as mediator. Carbon dating, ink chemistry, handwriting comparison, and imaging are now standard tools, and each time they've given careful results, but rarely definitive. It reminds us that testing only adds pieces to the puzzle. It doesn't always lock the door on doubt. What makes all this so compelling and so hazardous is how quickly digital platforms amplify everything. One new find can spark documentaries, academic symposia, and spiritual debates, all before scholars can finish peer review. Whether the discoveries end up true or false, they show our deep longing to connect with history directly, to imagine Jesus in private letters rather than public sermons. But they also teach us that viral excitement doesn't always equal truth, and that in scholarship, patience and precision matter just as much as discovery. The big question of how real. At its core, the debate centers on a dramatic decision: believe and embrace it, or hold off until conclusive proof arrives. This isn't new. Scholars have been parsing the historical Jesus for centuries. As far back as the 18th century, historical critical methods reshaped our approach to Jesus studies, moving beyond dogma to search for the real man behind the Gospels. One powerful framework scholars use is the criterion of dissimilarity. Based on this, if the message diverges from both Jewish norms and later church doctrine, it's more likely authentic. Supporters of the letter argue that its tone, intimate, healing-focused, doesn't echo later theological patterns, strengthening its plausibility. But skeptics counter with the criterion of embarrassment. This one holds the idea that if a document contains unexpected or uncomfortable details about Jesus or that period, it might be more reliable. In this case, does the letter's non-theological, compassionate tone embarrass church authorities by minimizing dogma? Or was it tailor-made to appeal to modern sensibilities? Another layer is Lewis's trilemma, which suggests that Jesus must have been a liar, lunatic, or Lord. if a private letter softening his public image emerged, it would complicate that framing. Does this letter paint Jesus more as a friend than divine? And what does that mean for those seeing his identity in sharp terms? Today's digital age compounds the drama. Online forums burst with both believers and secular critics, with some saying that it doesn't matter who Jesus of Nazareth was or what he was, what's most important is the lessons he taught. This tension, fact versus meaning, is alive and well. But there's a deeper question. What do we do with such a letter? If proven authentic, does it become scripture, a theological muse, or a piece of history? Some argue that a personal letter, even from Paul, wouldn't necessarily belong in the canon. Alternatively, archaeologists see this as a thrilling moment for historical methodology. New finds drive paradigm shifts, just like the infancy Gospel of Thomas fragments from Egypt expand how we view Jesus' early years. But just as quickly, we're reminded of forgeries, the secret Gospel of Mark, Jesus' wife, Papyrus, and Islamic Apocrypha, each examined intensely before scholarly consensus tilted dismissive. Still, most historians agree Jesus existed as a historical figure. Debates now center on what he said and did. A letter like this might not prove divinity, but it could significantly humanize him, offering depth to a 2,000-year-old persona. Ultimately, the big question lingers. Do we prioritize absolute academic proof or breathe life into faith narratives? Will this letter, authentic or not, change how we view Jesus, his humanity, his mission, our response? That is the enduring question opening as this jar is cracked. Do you think this letter was really written by Jesus himself? Let us know in the comments section. We hope you enjoyed watching this video. Remember to like, share it, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.